Welcome, everyone. We are excited to have Kevin Gaither, or as friends call him, KG, CRO and founder of Inside Sales Expert, joining us today. Kevin
Thanks for
has,
having me.
yeah, welcome, Kevin. Kevin has an impressive track record with over 25 years of experience, having built and led sales teams across 8 startups, three of which have seen successful liquidity events, which is kind of becoming a rarity right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Extensive experience in building high velocity sales teams and scaling businesses into Inc. 500 companies. Kevin has been mentioned in the AAISP top 25 most influential inside sales professionals 6 years in a row, I guess, Kevin.
Yep.
So glad to have you join us. And, let's get into the questions.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Great. So tell us, you've worked with numerous pre-IPO tech companies and led sales teams. What inspired you to focus on building high velocity sales teams? Like, why did you do what you're doing today?
Yeah. So the first 7 years of my career, I was working in enterprise sales, average deal size being $300,000 to $500,000, 6 month sales cycles. And while I made President's Club and I was good at it, it wasn't really something that excited me because it was like 2 deals a month. I'd close 2 deals a month and there would be a lot of anxiety. And the next job after I left that industry, I got into inside sales again, but it wasn't a transactional sale, but I was doing like 6, 10, 12 deals, a month personally, and then started leading that team. What I didn't know is that there wasn't really a word for it at the time. High velocity sales wasn't a thing, but it wasn't transactional, like 3, 4 deals a day. And the reality is, Karan, that I just liked the singles and the doubles and getting that validation of, every few days closing a deal and then, moving forward. That's number one. And number two, as far as why do I focus on high velocity sales versus, enterprise sales or anything else for that matter? I like the idea of a company building their customer base with lots of diversity in it. And when you're selling to enterprises where 10% of your revenue is coming from a couple of customers, that's a lot of risk, And so I really liked the idea of going after, Mark Schuster talks about elephants, deer, and rabbits when you're going after customers. And right. Rabbits would be transactional. Elephants would be the Fortune 500, of course. And I always liked going after the deer. Now, when the Great Recession occurred in like 2008, 2009, it became a must that there was some sort of go-to-market strategy that included high velocity sales. And so when you put all those three things together, it just sort of fit me better. I like the diversity. And then VCs would not invest in companies if they didn't have some sort of high velocity go-to-market strategy. It just became a natural progression for me to double down on what I know and keep focusing on helping these tech companies avoid the mistakes when they're building these types of high velocity sales teams.
Great. And Kevin, if you could explain inside sales and how you built like these teams and what is the playbook for success on that front, and some customer stories.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm laughing because everything I know is because I screwed up. everything I know, now I made mistakes, back then, building and and it didn't kill me. It just made me stronger. Obviously, that sounds trite. What I find that most people screw up is in like these 4 pillars or 4 particular areas, especially with startups. And I'll explain why after I get through this. So the first area is recruiting, hiring, interviewing. And by the way, those all sound like the same thing to most people. They're not. And at early stage tech companies, who you put into the seat is incredibly important. It's amplified and let's put it this way, when you put the wrong butt in the seat, the effects of the wrong butt in the seat, leadership, AE, marketing, whomever, training. So it's incredibly important to build out a very thorough, thoughtful, but speedy interviewing, hiring, recruiting process there. And most people mess that up. So that's the first thing that I learned. The second thing, and again, these are all from mistakes, and I'll explain in just a second. Then number 2, training and onboarding. Trish Bertuzzi from the Bridge Group has this great quote. She goes, "We make this strategic decision to make hires, but then we make the tactical mistake of onboarding and training them improperly." And what ends up happening is that these, in my instance, these salespeople come on board to this startup and they're all excited to join. And then you slam them down at their desk, hand them a few boxes and go, hey, while we're waiting, build your computer, build your desk. And there's a rite of passage to that, I guess. But in those moments, your candidate is thinking to themselves, did I make a good decision coming here? Like day one, they don't have their stuff together and I'm building desks and computers. Like, that's what you want me to do, So you really have to have a very structured onboarding and training program. So that's the second pillar, the second area where they make a lot of mistakes. The third is in coaching. Many people, inexperienced people, tend to conflate training and coaching. These are two separate things. Making sure that your leadership team or yourself, and most often at these startups, you are the trainer, you are the coach, you are the sales leader. Coaching is making sure to reinforce the things that you trained on. And if you don't make sure that that is a part of your weekly cadence with your reps, and to be clear, a pipeline review session is not a coaching session. You could be doing coaching during that session, of course, but there should be a very discrete session of coaching to help that salesperson get to the next level, make sure they have the skills, assess the skills. So that's the third pillar where they mess up, and that's part of the playbook. And then the fourth is performance management. Most people think about performance management in terms of like terminations, and it is. That's one area for sure. But I like to think about it in terms of promotions, demotions, and a set of expectations that the sales leader needs to lay out very, very clearly. And here's a very, very simple question. Week 1, when you're a sales leader and you're taking over a team, ask the team that's currently in place what it takes to get fired. And if they don't know the answer to that, you've got a problem with performance management. They have no idea what it takes to get fired. They don't know what it takes to get promoted either. And there's probably a very loose set of expectations set upon them. And so that's the fourth area that they make these mistakes. And the simple story that I've got on that last piece there, and I can tell stories on all 4 of those columns, of course, Karan. One of my first sales leadership jobs, I had a salesperson that was reporting to me, and his name is John. John didn't hit quota for 6 months. He was in a sales role reporting to me, didn't hit quota for 6 months. After 6 months, I'm like, I'm tired of this. And I went to the HR department and I said, I think it's time to let John go. Can we fire him at the end of the month? And appropriately, the HR person said to me, does he know that it's not acceptable to not hit quota for 6 months? And I went, how would he not know? How would he not know? He's in sales. And she goes, did you make it explicitly clear? And I did. And I said, well, geez, I didn't. And that's a mistake I made in my own personal sales leadership career. And you would think, well, sure, they'd have to know. They haven't hit quota in 6 months. That's not acceptable. You're in sales. But he was there for 3 months and 4 months and 5 months, and I didn't do anything about it. And I didn't warn him. So how is he supposed to know? Salespeople aren't mind readers. And I know that frustrates a lot of people that might be listening to this, to this event there. So if you focus on those 4 areas, you'll be far ahead of the game with respect to a playbook and building your sales team at startups or any other company thereafter. And most of the time, these 4 pillars do not get built, especially at startups, because people will say, run fast and break things. We're just going to move and we're just going to, just go fast, just go fast. We don't need process. It doesn't take a lot to implement each of these things at a startup, even when you're moving very, very fast. So hopefully that answers your question. There's so much more details, but we only have a few minutes here to cover that.
Yeah, no, this is great. Again, now there are AI tools which are coming in for training. One of the pet peeves has been hey, we are so busy. How do we take time out for training? We just had a last LinkedIn Live with a sales coach, right? Who's hey, everyone needs that coaching. And a lot of times they just don't get it on the job. It's figure it out. I will throw you in the deep end of the sea and here's a rope, you sink or die.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, so you're saying like, how do you carve out time to do that? Okay.
Or like, can AI solve that problem now?
I'm not convinced that AI can solve that problem yet. I actually have seen some very good tools there. But once again, there's a conflation, by the way, between training and coaching, because I've seen these wonderful applications where if you've been trained on how to do cold calling or objection handling or negotiation, you can get into these coaching tools, and there's these AI bots that'll actually talk back and forth with you and rate the call. And I think that's pretty cool. But if you don't train them properly in the first place, coaching is irrelevant. You can't coach somebody on something that they don't know. And I'm not so convinced that the training is, AI training is there, just that. But let me get back to your question though. I feel like there's two things. First, when you are hiring salespeople, you must be hiring people that are already continual learners. Okay. Because of those limited resources, like there isn't, 10 grand a year in the budget per rep designed for, sales training. It just doesn't exist. I've been you're in these limited resources types of environments. And so because of those limited resources, you need to be looking, and part of your hiring benchmark should be find salespeople who are already continual learners. Tell me about the last 3 books you've read, and you want to be looking for training books, development books, self-help books, So that's number one. You want to find the people that are already inclined to be self-starters, continual learners on their own. But number 2, do not just hire them and go figure it out on your own. Okay. Because that's a recipe for like, well, I don't even know what my sales leader is doing for me. Okay. So this part, you have to make it intentional. One of the very simple things that I did at one of the first startups that I was at long ago was on Fridays after lunch, we would do Tales from the Field. And this was literally going around the horn, and I would have a call played, and then the sales team would just go around and critique that call. One good, one bad, one good, one bad. And we go around. And that allowed us to have each of the salespeople coaching the others. And it allowed me to identify who didn't know the training. So then we can take that call and go, oh, there's a training opportunity. But the point to that, Karan, is it was intentional. It was on the calendar, intentional. It's like, if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't exist. So if you believe that training is important, then you'd better put it on the calendar.
Yeah. So that's a great example. I think that's now like, a very practical tip, saying Friday evenings, just before wrapping up the week, right? Like just go around the room, one call, people critique it, what they like, what they don't like.
Yes.
It's one good way. And then how do you take out time for those one-on-one trainings? Like, is that the responsibility of just the VP of sales or CRO, or you can have peers give feedback? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. So this is where I really make that distinction between, pipeline reviews and coaching sessions. Okay. There's a download on my site, InsideSalesExpert.com, the Model Week of Great Sales Managers. And the Model Week of Great Sales Managers very distinctly sets apart pipeline review meetings from those individual coaching sessions, and working with those salespeople. Everybody knows you got to do more coaching, Okay. I say, great, 30 minutes a week per rep, and you put it on the calendar, but you're very intentional about what you want to accomplish, because the goal of that coaching session is to move that sales rep forward in their life or their career. When I say life and career, by the way, it's, they may have questions about how to apply for a mortgage or pay down debt or something like that. So you want to be focused on taking that sales rep, forward in their life and in their career. And through those conversations, you may identify that there are specific things that you can teach them. Somebody told me the other day, and I've never heard this phrase before: leadership is teaching. Leadership is teaching. And I thought, what a great way of just clarifying what your job is. You're always, yes, we need to close business, but leadership is teaching. But again, you have to have a distinct and separate coaching session on the calendar, 30 minutes a week per rep, period.
Got it. And Another question, KG, right? Like companies which are in the 1 to 10 journey or the 10 to 100 journey, how does this, like, how do you adjust your levers to make sure that it'll never be smooth, but like how do you remove friction as you scale in terms of, like, as a sales leader, right? Like hiring and all these points, like how do you
Yeah.
adjust those levels?
Yeah. So I'm laughing again because this is just another one of those areas where I've made mistakes, but I've also been successful at the same time. One, there's this catchphrase that I want to leave your audience with, which is, when you start to scale like that, like 1 to 10, and then you go 10 to 50, you want to think about working on the business, not in the business. So when you're in the 1 to 10 phase, like it or not, you're rolling your sleeves up and you're getting filthy dirty. Like you're picking up trash, you're building desks, you're playing tech support with, the phone system not working or headsets, or, you're doing a whole host of really filthy things that you're like, that's not my job. Hey, look, you're at a startup, 1 to 10 million, everything is your job. Don't whine and complain, love it or leave it. Okay. So when you're in the 1 to 10 phase, you're working in the business a lot. Okay. The 10 to 50 and beyond, you have to level up. And now you have to start thinking about, working on the business, not being in the business. And if you have to be working in the business, that means that there's a single point of failure. And that's awful. And this is a real story, by the way, a cohort of mine, let's put it this way, somebody I worked with at one of my previous companies, I asked him why so many decisions ran through him. Just to be clear, this is like a 50-person company. And in his department, almost everything ran through him. He had to make a decision on almost everything that went through his department. And I said, man, why do you do that? That's exhausting. You're up at till midnight every single night. And he goes, KG, because when it runs always through me, I've created job security for myself. And the reality is about within the next 12 months, he got moved, quote unquote, moved to another department. Why? Because at scale, that doesn't work. And your leadership team above you starts to see this single point of failure. And that ends up being risk. And that ends up being problems. Okay. And so in order to level up and start working on the business, not in the business, it's about repeatable processes that you put in place. And here's the other gruesome phrase that I like to use to make an impression on people. If you got hit by a bus tomorrow, would your team continue to work seamlessly without you? And I know that sounds brutal to think about.
No, that's fair.
But if, for our audience, in order to get to that next level, you have to absolutely think, if I got hit by a bus, would the team continue would goals get delivered? Would commission checks keep being written? Would the salespeople know where to get all their questions answered? If you're pounded every single day by your sales reps going, can we chat? Got 5 minutes? Can I ask about this, and this, and this, and this, and this? And they're coming to you regularly with these, can we chat for 5 minutes type of thing? That represents a problem because there's no repeatability because they keep coming, to you. And one of the best things you can do for yourself, Karan, to figure out if there's a problem is go on vacation. Take Slack off your phone and turn off your email from your business, and go and say, if there's an emergency, text me or call me. And then when you get back, see how much stuff broke. And when you see how much stuff broke while you're out, go fix that. And that's your best solution to figure out if your team can run smoothly without you. Go on vacation for a few days, and that'll teach you very, very quickly where you have created unknowingly or knowingly single points of failure.
Yeah, no, and that makes a ton of sense, KG. I wanted to just ask you about this, right? Like, share some stories, like, because people relate to that. Like, you share the story of like Friday, post lunch, get together and reviewing and critiquing. Are there other stories like that where you failed, like some of the lessons from your book as well, where you failed, and what were the things you guys did to become successful? Like some practical examples.
There's so many. there's this hot take that I've got, and every time I publish it, people get all worked up about this. I wish this wasn't true. I'm going to say it anyway. You can tell I'm kind of sheepish. Your salespeople are not your friends. Yeah. And I've learned that the hard way. I've learned that the hard way, where I would tell a sales rep on my team something that maybe I shouldn't have said, but I told them because I thought that we were friends, or we would go and have drinks or have a discussion. I once was in the restroom with one of my sales reps, and we were both standing there doing our business, and I made an inappropriate comment. It was literally bathroom humor. And if you were amongst a group of friends from college, it would have been no problem, and it would have been funny as heck. Right. But in this particular instance, I made the mistake of assuming that he would interpret it as a friend would interpret it. And sure enough, he went directly to HR and reported me. And I remember that feeling of thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I could lose my job because of this stupid comment that I made, because I trusted that this salesperson was like a friend of mine and that I could do those things. And that was one of the very first mistakes and lessons that I learned. That's not in the book, by the way, but I learned that I was just like, your salespeople aren't your friends. And if you think that they are, just wait till you have to have a difficult conversation with them. They will sell you out just like that. Just like that. Here's another one, by the way. Here's another, real story. Yeah. Obviously, I can't tell any names, but this is another hot take. Under no circumstances do you give feedback to rejected candidates. Okay. And many people disagree with that vehemently because they believe that the world is a great place and that everyone should deserve to get that kind of feedback. And Karan, 99 out of 100 times, that's true. But there'll be that one person, and I'm excluding any sort of like real discriminatory issues here. I mean, obviously that's really bad stuff. Okay. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like somebody was legitimately not a good fit for the team, but then they decide to ring that bell and make some sort of claim against a hiring manager. And this happened to one of my hiring managers. And we had to scrutinize this and review, because they thought they were being, even though I told the sales manager, there's no upside to this. They thought, well, I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be nice because I really liked this candidate, but they just weren't a good fit. And sure enough, this candidate took it the wrong way and made it a big deal. Thankfully, they didn't lawyer up or anything like that. But it caused so much more of a distraction because they didn't like it. Now, again, 99 out of 100 times, there'd be no problem with this and everything would be copacetic. But the reality is, Karan, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so it just doesn't make any sense to give any sort of, feedback to rejected candidates, because they will, the wrong candidate will make your life an absolute living hell. And unfortunately, this is what my sales manager and I had to deal with. I can keep going on with these stories, but you take it from here. I know our time is limited.
No, absolutely. And this brings us to the next point, which is how do you hire the right candidates? Like, what do you look for? How do you evaluate like velocity, cultural fit? Like when you look back at all the hiring you've done, have you figured out a pattern or a playbook of saying these are the things, if you do it right, most likely the chances will increase of you getting the right?
But by the way, most people are not going to pick up what you just said very as well as I did. Okay. Hiring is not a certainty. Okay. There's no guarantees. There's no guarantees in hiring. The reality is most people think they're good interviewers, but they're really not. And their hiring success rate is somewhere in the 30 to 50% range, which, by the way, is incredibly expensive. The published and researched cost of a mishire is typically 3 to 5 times a salary for these employees. So now when you're paying your salespeople $150,000, $160,000, and you make a mistake that's three to 5 times that amount, you better wake up very, 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 very quickly. Okay. And so there's a number of pieces to this. First, net, when you implement what I'm talking about next, you're going to improve your probabilities of success. And you can take, and what I did was I took my hiring success rate from like 30% to closer to 80% in a matter of about 6 months, because I did several things. One was defining what good looks like. You have to be very intentional about your hiring benchmark and what those characteristics look like. And Karan, this is not a difficult process, but most people don't do it. You get a group of people in the room that do the job, manage the job, work with the job, and you come up with these 8 to 12 characteristics, define those characteristics, and then you come up with 3 to 5 behavioral interview questions for each one of those characteristics. I have my 6 favorite, and I'll give you those in just a second, okay? But what that does is when you get a group of people in the room, you can make sure that you're paying attention to cultural fit, as well as other attributes that the salespeople need to have to do well in that environment. If the job was to speak to me, what would it tell me it needs for success? So now you're as objectively as you can, you're writing these things out. Here are the 6 that I find it non-negotiable for salespeople. If I was just to go in blind, these are the 6. Need for achievement, competitiveness, optimism, coachability, continual learning. We mentioned that before. Continual learning and organizational skills. I look at most of those, 5 out of 6 of those, as traits that I just can't teach. I can't teach you how to be competitive. I can't teach you to be optimistic. I can't teach you to work your butt off and set high goals for yourself. So those are the 6 that I would look for, but that's just the beginning. What good looks like. The next is creating a thorough but speedy interview process. You should be able to get up and down on these candidates in 2 weeks or less, okay? This month-long, 2-month-long, 3-month-long process. Look, I like hiring slow and firing fast, but if your interview process is 2 months long, a month long, like, no. But I can also tell you that candidates don't like the interview process that's like one and done. Hey, I interviewed you once, thumbs down, thumbs up, because they know that you're not really vetting properly, to begin with. And so that step could have a phone screen, 2 phone screens, a face-to-face, maybe an assessment in there, maybe a final demo. I don't particularly like the final demo, but you can do all of those things, phone screen, manager screen, 3-hour in-person and an assessment, and maybe a project or something like that. You can do all that in less than 10 business days. And if you can't, in my experience, you're doing it wrong. And if you put those 2 things together, develop like what good looks like, and develop a very thorough interview process, and the interviewing team follows the rules, follows the process, you're going to improve your probabilities of making great salesperson hires, especially compared to the competition that's literally thumbs up, thumbs down, wet finger in the air. Do I think they're a good fit or not? That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and you know what you just said applies to actually all roles.
Does
what
it?
Good looks like? Yeah, I mean, right? Product, tech, like what good looks like, and how do you evaluate against that?
I would think so. I try not to talk about things I don't understand. So, what does it take to hire an engineer? I don't know. So if you agree with that, fantastic. That more value for your audience.
Yeah, and Katie, finally, we're coming to the end. 2 things, right? One, how's AI transforming the whole inside sales process?
Yeah. I'll give you my opinion on this. And I feel like there's so many people out there, and I don't know why they write it this way. Maybe it's ignorance, or maybe they just want clicks, but AI is not taking your job. Okay. If you're in sales, AI is not taking your job. The way I like to look at AI is that it's an Iron Man super suit. It goes around the human and enhances it works with the human for the results that you want to get. But without the human, there's something lacking. If you've ever tried to write a blog post or use GPT, you see the crap and the drivel that it puts out, you'll go, oh yeah, well, you need the human to like do some tweaking on that. Okay. So I view it as a tool that works together. I think that there is a lot to be desired as it relates to the current usage of AI, especially with the emails, these coaching tools. I don't think good there. But it's not going away, and I fully believe it. I fully believe in it as a tool to enhance the human within the AI, the super suit, if you will there.
Great. We are on time. Thanks, KG. Lovely speaking with you, and look forward to many more discussions.
That sounds great. Well, thanks for having me on the show.